one of the most frustrating situations in business, and that is the situation where no one quite understands what's going on. There's a project to be completed, and there's frustration all over the place because no one is really sure who's in charge, and people all say, hey, I'm doing my job, but the project's not moving forward. And this causes all sorts of chaos and confusion and headaches and leads to all sorts of bad things like micromanagement and management swooping in and trying to save the day. And what I wanted to talk today about is the concept of setting the agenda. This is the concept of pushing things forward, taking responsibility for them, and making sure they're actually being communicated properly. And so people actually understand what's going on. For those of you who don't know, I run a software development company called Shrine Development, and people are always asking me, what makes Shrine Development better? And I say it's the process and it's the people. Pretty much true for every high-end services firm. But in particular, I want to talk about the people. It's not just what they know, it's what they do, and it's what they do frequently. And so this trait of setting the agenda and driving it forward, I think is the one trait that I've really seen separates the greats from the goods. So before we dig into that, what do I mean by setting the agenda? Agenda setting refers to setting goals and outlining a plan of action that you or others should take. So this means setting the path forward. It's as simple as that. It means having a preference. It means not just deferring and saying, oh, well, Sally or Raj or Billy has it. You know, it's really important that you are always pushing things forward. And if you're not the one who's pushing it forward, you know who is. And that you take responsibility for having that knowledge and making sure things are moving forward. So this is a common characteristic I've seen from every great person I've worked with. And really, I think this is even where the fetish behind entrepreneurship comes from, the glorification of people. I think it really comes down to being proactive and then having a plan and pushing it forward. It sounds really simple, but at the same time, I can't tell you the number of times I've seen people where if you ask if a project's going to be completed, or if something is going to be done, and they will sort of defer or offer some sort of answer like, well, I sent the email, or, well, I wasn't sure what to do, so I figured I would ask you. Meanwhile, 24 or 48 hours has gone by, or in some case weeks, people will just sit there and say, well, I wasn't sure what to do, so I wanted to discuss it with you. And then you ask, well, what'd you do in the meantime? Well, not much. And it's like, okay, that's sort of a bummer because typically everyone's busy, everyone has things going on, and they assume you're doing your quote-unquote job. And this actually is a failure of leadership on many levels. One of the things that it comes down to is making sure your team's aligned and everyone knows where to go. But let's table that conversation and talk about the individual and the responsibility that they have to push things forward. So really, having any sort of plan and pushing it forward is better than no plan. So when it comes down to setting the agenda, it's always better to push forward. Even if you're unsure of where exactly to go, that is still better than doing nothing. This also comes into play when you think about what is my responsibility. Your responsibility is not just like the items that are on your job description. It is ultimately the things that you're going to be held accountable for. And I truly believe that if I'm going to be held accountable for something, then it should be my plan. And likewise, you'll see this happen in teams often, where there's sort of what's considered a clash in personalities, but really it comes down to a clash in responsibilities. And again, you have to set the agenda and make sure it's clear that if you're the leader, that you're setting the agenda properly. That like, oh, hey, Raj is going to do this, Sally's going to do that. This is my plan. The wrong way to go about this, and this is a bit counterintuitive, is you don't necessarily want to say, hey, person X, just figure it out. Hey, Sally, just figure it out. Let me know how it goes. You don't want to be that vague. You want to sort of set the agenda and say, okay, Sally, I want you to do this, and Raj, I want you to do that. Likewise, if you're being assigned work, you want to make sure that anything that you're going to be held accountable for, any sort of project completions, that you are having input on the plan and that you understand it. And if it comes down from management, awesome, then you can roll with it. But make sure that you understand it and that you're all in on it and that you can own that plan, because ultimately, when it comes down to it, you need to be pushing something forward. You need to be pushing a plan forward. Now, this happens on the flip side, where if things come to you, if you get an email or a customer support request and it comes to you, you need to set the agenda. So it's not just on like when you're planning out your own work, it's also when things come to you. You always need to strive to make sure that people know that they're being heard and that you are in control of the situation and you're going to take care of it. What I mean by that is you let people know, hey, I've got this. And this doesn't mean that you drop everything, which I'll talk about in a second, and do it. It means that you acknowledge that you receive something and then you get to work. And it doesn't mean you have to be perfect either. This doesn't mean if a customer support request comes in that you immediately drop everything and you say, okay, Mr. Customer X, I'm going to get you this done in 15 minutes. No, that's a disaster. An absolute disaster waiting to happen. A better response is, thank you for the inquiry. We'll take a look. We'll get back to you in 2 hours or 2 business days or 2 years. It doesn't really matter what the timeline is necessarily, because that depends on the situation. What's important is that you're getting back to people right away and you're letting them know that, hey, I'm pushing this thing forward. I'm here to help. And it's really important not just to get to work and then provide an update when it's done. I often will see this with junior people. They will get an email, they'll just start working away, they'll spend 3 days working on something, and then they'll send a response. In the meantime, frustration's building, and in some cases, people might have thought you weren't doing anything at all for 3 days. So let's make sure that part of setting the agenda is being proactive with your planning, and then when things come to you, make sure that you're being proactive in your response and getting back to people and then letting them know what is happening. So again, this doesn't mean dropping everything. This is a huge mistake. Being responsive does not mean fighting fires and trying to be a hero every single day on every single email. It means that you're setting expectations properly. And in fact, this should make your job easier, because what you're going to do is you're going to message appropriately based on all the things that you have going on. Because unless someone says something is super urgent, oftentimes you don't need to treat it as super urgent. You will learn to prioritize, and you'll be surprised if you say, hey, I know you have an issue, I'll take a look at it and I will send you a fix in 2 business days. Or I will send you an update in 2 business days. Or if you're not sure on that, then say, hey, it might be next week. And if people get upset, then that's understandable. Then you can handle that. But don't create unnecessary pressure on yourself to get a response to people right away that guarantees some sort of outcome right away when you're not sure you can actually deliver it. By all means, if you can fix an issue in 15 minutes and you're sure of it and this is all you do every day, then message that. But don't feel the obligation to be a hero with every single email or every single response that comes to you. Often people just want to know that you have it, you're in control, and that they can sort of take their attention and move on with their day. Now, a big part of setting the agenda also is making sure that it gets done and making sure that you don't allow things to become easily blocked. So if you have let's say for instance, you have a customer support email and it requires you're working customer support, or if I'm working customer support and I'm working with an engineering team. If I send an email to the engineering team, I tell the customer, hey, I'll get you a response in 2 days. I send an email to the engineering team, and then they don't get back to me. It's really important that I just don't sit there and let that sort of rest. Hopefully there are procedures in place and expectations on when you should be escalating, but if not, by all means, try to push it forward and really people are busy. So urge them to respond and say, hey, how's this issue coming? How's this issue coming? How's this issue coming? And then if it's still not being taken care of, then you escalate. But my point is, if you're going to be held responsible for something, if I'm in customer support and I know that one of the things that affects my job performance is customer satisfaction, then I really need to own getting customer issues resolved. And so if someone else is involved and I need to escalate to them, I still need to maintain responsibility for that issue being resolved. Because again, it's not just what's in your job description, it's what you're going to be held accountable for. So in this case, setting the agenda means pushing forward, and if I'm blocked, then I'm constantly trying to get unblocked. And I'm helping with that energy, that push forward, because that's a surprising amount of success, is just the energy. A lot of people know a lot of things, but they often don't want to actually put the energy necessary to make things happen. It's not enough just to know. You actually have to do. Likewise, as I said before, it's not necessarily to be a hero every time, and it's absolutely okay to follow the lead. Setting the agenda does not mean coming in and trying to be a hero and going in and fixing every problem yourself. Not at all. It means having a path forward that's clearly defined and helping push it forward, and making sure when people are blocked that you try to help unblock them. But it doesn't mean going in there and trying to hero everything. Every once in a while I'll see this. Someone will take an extraordinary amount of responsibility way beyond the scope of their job, and then they fail, and then they get very upset because they're like, oh, I did X, I'm a developer, but I also did the design and the project management, and I also tried to help with the sales, and now I'm being held accountable only for the engineering part. That's not fair. And that's just not simply true. What you're held accountable for is what you should really try to set the agenda for, and that means that you're willing to play with others and you're part of a team. So this doesn't mean my way or the highway. It doesn't mean you have to be a hero every single time. What it does mean is that you set the agenda for things you control, and when you're a part of the team on other projects, other people are setting the agenda, that you make sure that you know what's going on. So lastly, I'll leave you with this. Pushing things forward actually is easier than not pushing things forward in terms of stress. When people don't know what's going on, they become stressed. They try to become they try to get involved, and they try to micromanage, or they try to go in there. You'll see the boss come in and try to fix a bunch of things. That's because there's a lack of confidence on what exactly is going on, and that comes from people not setting the agenda properly, or there's another issue which I mentioned, which is that just the team is not aligned, which we'll talk about in a different video. But a lot of it has to come down to when people are uncertain, they will start to act uncertain, and that means they will try to get control of the situation, and they will come in and they will start messing with stuff, and that's when you get clashes in personality. That's when you get the micromanagers. That's when you get a lot of resentment. It comes from people not knowing what's going on and then feeling like they have to get involved. So when you set the agenda and people are sure what's going on, and then you set a plan, you execute on it, you will find that things in a project become way less stressful, and then also you're clear on what exactly you're doing, and then so you can also make it clear what is not your responsibility. And then if people provide the feedback like, hey, oh, this is your responsibility, you can have a conversation, but you do it up front rather than afterwards. So hope this was helpful for you. And really, so when you're thinking about your day-to-day tasks, try to think about, how can I set the path forward? How can I communicate that? And how can I help push it forward? Hope this has been helpful.